They came back to a world of ice. The alien vessels descended through Earth's atmosphere after an absence of 65 million years, expecting to find the warm, humid planet they once knew. Instead, their scanners detected something impossible. Massive white sheets stretched across entire continents. Oceans had shrunk to half their size. The air itself had turned thin and bitter. This was not their Earth. Where tropical forests once swayed, mountains of ice now towered 3 kilometers high, taller than the Himalayas. Europe had vanished beneath a frozen wasteland. North America lay buried under glacial fortresses that made Antarctica look small. The planet had become an alien world in their absence. But something moved in this frozen hell. Colossal shadows trudged across the ice, creatures the size of tanks, their bodies wrapped in thick fur, carved paths through snow deeper than houses. Saber-toothed predators stalked through forests of ice, and among them, small, dark figures huddled around fires, wearing the skins of giants they had somehow learned to kill. The observers watched in fascination and horror. Earth had been transformed into something unrecognizable, something brutal, something magnificent. But here's what they didn't understand, what we're only beginning to piece together from ancient scrolls of ice and stone. This frozen apocalypse wasn't random. It wasn't punishment from the gods. It followed a pattern, a rhythm, a heartbeat that pulsed through time itself. And that pattern holds secrets about our past that could change everything we thought we knew about survival, extinction, and the future of our species. Before we dive into this story, a story that took scientists centuries to decode, hit that subscribe button and like this video too. You don't mind subscribing to this channel because you would be glad you did. What you're about to hear isn't just another history lesson. This is the dark truth hidden in ice cores and mammoth bones, written in a language we almost lost forever. This is the story when ice ruled the earth. Now, let's travel deeper. 2.5 million years ago, Earth entered what scientists call the Pleistocene epoch, the Great Ice Age. But calling it the Ice Age is like calling World War II a battle. This wasn't one event. This was a war between ice and warmth that lasted over 2 million years, fought in cycles that repeated with mechanical precision. Every 100,000 years, like clockwork, the ice came. The glaciers didn't creep, they surged, mile-thick walls of frozen death that devoured forests, buried mountains, and pressed the life out of entire continents. When the ice advanced, sea levels dropped by 400 feet. Land bridges emerged from the ocean floor. Entire ecosystems fled towards the equator or died trying. The Scandinavian ice sheet alone weighed so much it pressed the continent down by hundreds of meters. The Earth's crust bent under the ice like a mattress under a sleeping giant. When the ice finally retreated, the land slowly bounced back, a process still happening today in places like northern Sweden and Canada. But between the ice, magic happened. When the glaciers retreated, they left behind a world transformed. Fertile valleys carved by ice, new rivers, fresh lakes, and in these brief warm periods called interglacials, life exploded back across the continents with savage beauty. Imagine walking across North America 20,000 years ago. The landscape stretches endlessly white, broken only by scattered forests where massive creatures move like living mountains.
Woolly mammoths, not just big elephants, but perfectly engineered Ice Age machines. Their blood contained antifreeze proteins. Their ears were tiny to prevent heat loss. Their curved tusks could slice through ice and strip bark from frozen trees. Some stood 13 feet tall and weighed 8 tons. When they walked, the ground trembled. But the mammoths weren't alone in this frozen kingdom. Giant ground sloths, the size of elephants, used claws longer than baseball bats to tunnel through the ice, creating burrows you could drive a car through. Cave bears twice the size of grizzlies dominated European caverns. Saber-toothed cats with 6-inch fangs hunted in packs across the frozen steppes. Glyptodons, armadillo tanks the size of Volkswagens, rolled across the landscape like living boulders. And watching all of this, learning to survive among titans that could crush them without noticing, were small bands of early humans. These weren't primitive cavemen, they were Ice Age engineers. They invented fitted clothing by studying animal hides. They created the world's first refrigerators by digging storage pits in permafrost. They developed trade networks that stretched across continents, exchanging obsidian tools and amber jewelry across thousands of miles of frozen wilderness. They painted their stories on cave walls, not just primitive scribbles, but sophisticated art that captured the raw power of their world. The cave paintings at Lascaux show not just animals, but relationships. Hunters and hunted, predator and prey, the delicate balance of survival when death stalked on saber teeth and could freeze you solid in a single night. But here's the disturbing part, the pattern. Ancient myths from around the world speak of cyclical destruction. The Norse called it Ragnarok, an endless winter that would consume the world. Hindu texts describe the Kali Yuga, ages of ice and darkness that repeat across cosmic time. Native American legends tell of the white earth that came and went like a breathing giant. Were these just stories, or were they genetic memories of actual catastrophe? The Ojibwe tell of a time when winter never ended and the spirits of ice walked the earth. Aboriginal Australians speak of a dreamtime cold that lasted generations. Chinese legends describe Gong Gong, a water deity who tilted the heavens and brought endless winter to punish humanity. These weren't isolated myths. They were echoes of real events, passed down through thousands of generations of survivors who watched the ice advance and retreat like a cosmic tide. Scientists now know the pattern was real. Every 100,000 years, like a planetary heartbeat, the ice returned. For 90,000 years, glaciers dominated. Then, in just a few thousand years, they vanished. The warm periods, like the one we live in now, were brief interruptions in an otherwise frozen world. But what could cause such massive, regular changes? What force was powerful enough to freeze and thaw entire continents on schedule? For centuries, the ice ages remained a mystery, wrapped in frozen mammoth bones and strange geological scars. Scientists found evidence of ancient glaciers in places that never saw snow. They discovered tropical fossils buried under Arctic permafrost. The Earth's past made no sense. Some blamed volcanic eruptions, others pointed to changes in ocean currents or atmospheric chemistry. A few suggested divine intervention or cosmic catastrophe. But none of these theories could explain the precise timing. None could account for the 100,000-year rhythm that pulsed through geological history like a buried clock.
The answer, when it finally came, was more beautiful and terrible than anyone imagined. The ice ages weren't caused by earthbound forces. They were orchestrated by the cosmos itself, by the hidden mechanics of our solar system, by changes in Earth's orbit so subtle they could only be detected by the most precise mathematical calculations. But understanding this cosmic clockwork revealed something even more disturbing. The pattern that governed the ice ages, the same pattern that determined whether our ancestors lived or died, is still running. The gears are still turning. The clock is still ticking. And according to the calculations, we're living on borrowed time. The next ice age should have started already. What force is powerful enough to delay the cosmic clockwork that has governed Earth's climate for millions of years? What could disrupt a pattern so precise it rivals the movements of planets themselves? The answer lies hidden in the orbital mechanics of our solar system, and in the story of a brilliant mathematician who solved the mystery while trapped in a prisoner of war camp during World War I.
The prisoner scratched equations into the walls of his cell with a rusty nail. World War I raged outside the fortress of Neusiedl, but inside the Austrian prison camp, a Serbian mathematician named Milutin Milankovic was solving the greatest mystery in Earth's history. No books, no instruments, just his mind, some stolen paper, and the burning need to understand why ice ages came and went like clockwork. His fellow prisoners thought he'd gone mad. While they played cards and counted days until freedom, Milankovic filled every scrap of paper with orbital calculations. He computed the wobble of Earth's axis. He traced the stretching and shrinking of our planet's orbit around the Sun. He mapped celestial mechanics with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. What he discovered would change everything we thought we knew about our planet's past and our future. But first, he had to survive the war and convince the world that the answer to ice ages lay not on Earth, but in the vast, cold machinery of space. Earth doesn't orbit the Sun in a perfect circle. It doesn't spin on a steady axis. It doesn't maintain constant distance from our star. Our planet wobbles. It stretches. It tilts. Like a spinning top slowly losing momentum, Earth's motion through space follows three distinct patterns that repeat over thousands of years. Each pattern changes how much sunlight reaches our planet, and when these patterns align in just the right way, they can trigger an ice age. Milankovic called them the astronomical theory of climate change. Today, we know them as Milankovic cycles, the hidden clockwork that has governed Earth's climate for millions of years. The first cycle, eccentricity. Every 100,000 years, Earth's orbit stretches from nearly circular to distinctly oval, then back again. When the orbit is more elliptical, our distance from the Sun varies dramatically throughout the year. This creates more extreme seasons and can push the planet toward glaciation. The second cycle, obliquity. Earth's axis tilts between 22.1 and 24.5 degrees every 41,000 years. When the tilt is smaller, summers become cooler, not enough warm to melt the previous winter's snow. Ice accumulates year after year, decade after decade, until continent-sized glaciers begin their march. The third cycle, precession. Like a wobbling top, Earth's axis traces a circle in space every 26,000 years. This determines which hemisphere gets more intense summers. When northern summers are weak, ice sheets grow across Canada and Europe. The frozen heart of the Ice Age begins to beat. But here's what terrified Milankovic as he worked through the mathematics. These cycles don't operate independently. They interact.
They amplify each other, and when all three align to reduce northern hemisphere summer warmth, the ice comes fast, catastrophically fast. Milankovitch wasn't the first to suspect that cosmic forces shaped Earth's climate. Ancient civilizations had been tracking celestial patterns for thousands of years, building monuments and machines that would make modern astronomers weep with admiration. The Babylonians mapped the wandering of planets with mathematical precision. They predicted eclipses centuries in advance. Their astronomical records, carved in cuneiform on clay tablets, tracked celestial cycles that spanned generations. The Maya built an entire civilization around cosmic timekeeping.
Their calendar system tracked not just days and years, but vast cycles of planetary motion spanning millions of days. They understood that time moved in wheels within wheels, patterns that repeated across scales beyond human lifetimes. But the most stunning example came from a Roman shipwreck discovered off the Greek island of Antikythera in 1900. Divers expecting gold and pottery instead found corroded bronze gears, the remains of an astronomical computer built over 2,000 years ago. The Antikythera mechanism could predict the positions of the sun, moon, and planets decades in advance. It tracked the 19-year metonic cycle of lunar phases. It calculated the elliptical orbit of the moon. It even predicted eclipses. This wasn't primitive astronomy. This was precision engineering designed to map the clockwork of the cosmos. Ancient humans understood something we're only rediscovering. The movement of celestial bodies follows patterns, predictable patterns, patterns that influence everything from tides to seasons to, as Milankovitch proved, the advance and retreat of continental ice sheets. But even Milankovitch's elegant mathematics couldn't explain everything about Ice Age timing. The orbital cycles predict gradual change, slow cooling over thousands of years as northern summers weaken, steady ice accumulation as glaciers expand from polar regions toward the equator. But the geological record tells a different story. Ice ages don't fade in slowly like sunset. They explode into existence like bombs. Temperature can drop 10 degrees Celsius in just a few decades. Glaciers can advance hundreds of miles in a single generation. Entire ecosystems can collapse and rebuild in the span of a human lifetime. The Younger Dryas event, 12,800 years ago, exemplifies this chaos. Earth was warming out of the last ice age when suddenly climate reversed. In less than 20 years, temperatures plummeted back to glacial conditions. Europe froze solid. The ice came roaring back. Then, 1,200 years later, warming resumed just as abruptly. Ice sheets collapsed. Sea levels rose 300 feet in a few thousand years. Entire continents transformed from frozen wasteland to temperate paradise in the geological equivalent of an instant. What could cause such violent swings? Ancient myths hold clues that modern science is only beginning to understand. Chinese legends tell of Gong Gong, the water god who tilted the pillars of heaven in a fit of rage, bringing winter without end. Norse mythology describes Fimbul winter, 3 years of bitter cold that precede Ragnarok, when Axe Age and Sword Age ravaged the world. Aboriginal Australians speak of the rainbow serpent thrashing in underground rivers, causing the earth to shake and the seasons to change. Hindu texts describe cosmic cycles where the wheel of time sometimes stutters, bringing ages of ice and darkness. Were these just stories, or were they cultural memories of real climatic catastrophes? Modern climate science suggests both. The orbital cycles provide the rhythm, but feedback loops in Earth's climate system provide the chaos.
When ice sheets grow large enough, they reflect more sunlight back to space, accelerating cooling. When ocean currents shift, they can redirect heat transport around the globe. When massive lakes of glacial meltwater break through ice dams, they can shut down ocean circulation in a matter of years. The clockwork of the cosmos sets the tempo, but Earth's climate system plays jazz.
As Milankovitch worked through his calculations in that Austrian prison camp, he faced a problem that still puzzles scientists today. The 100,000-year eccentricity cycle, the one that matches the timing of major ice ages, should be the weakest of the three orbital effects. Mathematically, changes in Earth's axial tilt should have more impact on climate than changes in orbital shape. The 41,000-year obliquity cycle should dominate ice age timing. But it doesn't. For the past million years, ice ages have followed the 100,000-year rhythm of eccentricity, not the more powerful 41,000-year cycle of tilt. This is called the 100,000-year problem, and it remains one of the greatest mysteries in climate science. Something amplifies the weak eccentricity signal. Something turns subtle changes in orbital shape into massive glacial interglacial cycles. But what? The answer may lie in the complex feedbacks between ice, ocean, and atmosphere, systems so interconnected that small changes cascade into global transformations. Or it may involve processes we haven't discovered yet. What Milankovitch proved is that ice ages follow predictable patterns driven by cosmic forces. What he couldn't explain is why those patterns sometimes go haywire, creating periods of rapid change that reshape the planet in geological instants. But understanding the clockwork was only the beginning of the mystery. Because while Milankovitch calculated orbital mechanics in his prison cell, paleontologists were digging up evidence of creatures so massive, so bizarre, that they challenged everything scientists thought they knew about life on Earth. These weren't just big animals, they were titans, living mountains of fur and muscle that dominated Ice Age landscapes. And somehow, small bands of early humans learned not just to survive among these giants, but to hunt them. History teaches us one powerful lesson. Nothing lasts forever. Not empires, not kings, not even entire civilizations. But stories. Stories only survive when they're passed on. So if you've made it this far, don't just be a silent traveler through time. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because if you don't, this story may vanish into the noise, just like the civilizations we speak of. Don't let it be forgotten.
The mammoth fell with a sound like thunder. 20 tons of fur and muscle crashed into the frozen ground as 30 hunters danced around the dying giant, their obsidian-tipped spears dark with blood. Steam rose from the massive carcass in the bitter air. Enough meat to feed the tribe for months. Enough hide to clothe them through the long winter. Enough bone to build shelter from the screaming winds. But this wasn't just a hunt. This was war. A war between the last great giants of the Ice Age and the most dangerous predator Earth had ever produced, Homo sapiens. The giants had ruled the frozen world for millions of years, creatures so massive they reshaped entire landscapes, so perfectly adapted to cold that they thrived where nothing else could survive. So dominant that their names still echo in our deepest myths and darkest dreams. But they made one fatal mistake. They underestimated the small, clever bipeds who watched from the shadows, who learned their patterns, who discovered their weaknesses, and who would ultimately drive most of them to extinction. Step into North America 30,000 years ago, and you enter a world that belongs in a fantasy novel. Woolly mammoths tower like living mountains, their curved tusks longer than telephone poles. But they're not alone on these frozen steppes. Giant brown sloths, the size of rhinos, rear up on massive hind legs using claws like swords to strip bark from ice-covered trees. Their tunnel systems honeycomb the earth,
burrows so large you could drive a truck through them. In the shadows between spruce forests, saber-toothed cats stalk on silent paws. Smilodon fatalis, the most famous of the saber teeth, weighs 400 pounds and carries 6-inch fangs designed for one purpose: punching through the thick hides of Ice Age megafauna. When they pounce, their bite force exceeds that of modern lions by 30%. But even the saber-teeth avoid the short-faced bears. Arctodus simus stands 12 feet tall on its hind legs, taller than a basketball hoop. It weighs 1,500 pounds of muscle and aggression. Its legs are so long it can run down horses. Its jaws are so powerful it can crack mammoth bones to reach the marrow inside. When archaeologists first discovered short-faced bear fossils, they thought they were looking at some kind of cave-dwelling dragon. South of the ice sheets, glyptodons roll across grasslands like living tanks. These armadillo cousins are the size of small cars, protected by shells that can stop saber-toothed fangs. Their tails end in spiked clubs that can shatter bones. When threatened, they simply pull their heads inside their armor and wait for danger to pass. And in the oceans, megalodons the size of school buses cruise through waters teeming with giant sea turtles and whale ancestors with legs. This wasn't our world. This was Middle-earth. This was Jurassic Park without the dinosaurs. This was a planet where nightmares had evolved into reality and ruled unchallenged for millions of years, until humans showed up. But calling them humans doesn't capture what these Ice Age survivors really were. They were living weapon systems, apex predators wrapped in carefully tailored fur who had turned the frozen wasteland into their hunting ground. Watch them work. A mammoth herd moves across the tundra like a mobile mountain range. Adult bulls weigh 8 tons and fear nothing. Their tusks can gore a saber-tooth. Their trunks can snap a human spine. Their thick hide can stop obsidian spear points.
But the hunters had studied these giants for generations. They know mammoths are near-sighted. They know the wind patterns across the steppes. They know exactly where the herd will cross the river when the ice breaks up in spring. They're waiting. 40 hunters spread across a valley, hidden in carefully prepared positions. When the mammoths enter the kill zone, the trap springs. Fire arrows arc through the air, not to kill, but to panic. Screaming humans emerge from concealment on all sides. The herd stampedes straight toward the cliff. The lead cow tries to stop, but momentum carries her forward. She tumbles over the edge, 8 tons of bone and muscle smashing against the rocks below. Others follow. Within minutes, the hunters had killed more megafauna than a pack of saber-toothed cats could bring down in a year. This wasn't random violence. This was military precision applied to Paleolithic warfare. Archaeological sites across North America tell the same story. Mammoth kill sites with evidence of systematic butchery. Spear points crafted with lethal efficiency. Tool caches positioned along migration routes. These weren't scavengers hoping for scraps. These were professional hunters who had turned mammoth killing into an industrial process. But the most remarkable discovery came from a child's grave in Montana. In 1968, construction workers near Anzick, Montana, uncovered something extraordinary: the 12,600-year-old burial of an infant boy, surrounded by over 100 stone tools and weapons. The artifacts belonged to the Clovis culture, North America's first known big game hunters. When scientists analyzed the boy's DNA in 2014, they discovered he was directly related to modern Native Americans. This child was a genetic link between Ice Age mammoth hunters and indigenous tribes across the Americas.
His people had crossed the Bering Land Bridge during the last glacial maximum and spread across 2 continents in just a few thousand years. But the tools buried with him tell a darker story. Clovis spear points are engineering marvels, knapped from high-quality stone with edges sharper than surgical steel. Designed with fluted bases that locked into wooden shafts with devastating efficiency. When hurled by atlatl, spear-throwing devices that tripled human throwing power, these weapons could punch through mammoth hide like bullets. The Anzac boy was buried with enough weapons to outfit a mammoth hunting expedition. At less than 2 years old, he was already being prepared for war against the giants. His people were so successful that Clovis points are found across North America, from Alaska to Mexico. In less than 500 years, they had colonized an entire continent and established the most sophisticated big-game hunting culture in human history. Then, suddenly, both the Clovis culture and the mammoths disappeared. But the giants left traces in human memory that persist to this day. Deep in the caves of Lascaux, France, Ice Age artists painted their world with stunning accuracy. Woolly mammoths march across stone walls in herds so realistic you can almost hear them trumpeting. Cave bears rear up in threat displays. Bison stampede across hunting grounds. These weren't primitive drawings, they were documentary films painted on cave walls. The artists got details right that scientists didn't discover until centuries later. Mammoth trunk anatomy, seasonal fur patterns, behavioral displays. They painted from life, capturing the raw power and beauty of creatures that dominated their world.
Aboriginal Australian art contains even older memories. Rock paintings in Arnhem Land show giant wombats, massive kangaroos, and carnivorous lizards the size of crocodiles, all megafauna that died out 50,000 years ago when humans first reached Australia. These aren't just pictures. They're cultural documents that preserve knowledge of extinct worlds. Native Siberian peoples tell stories of mammoths as underground creatures that die when exposed to sunlight. A myth that makes perfect sense if your ancestors occasionally found frozen mammoth carcasses emerging from thawing permafrost. Greek myths about cyclopes, one-eyed giants, may have originated when ancient Greeks discovered mammoth skulls. The large nasal opening in a mammoth skull, when seen from the front, looks exactly like a single eye socket in a massive humanoid head. Even our modern fantasy literature draws on Ice Age memories. Tolkien's Middle-earth is populated with creatures, oliphants, cave trolls, giant wolves, that bear striking resemblance to Pleistocene megafauna. George R.R. Martin's dire wolves, mammoths, and long winters echo the Ice Age world our ancestors knew intimately. We carry the giants with us in our DNA and our dreams. But humans weren't the only intelligent species stalking Ice Age Europe. In caves scattered across the continent, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of our closest evolutionary cousins, the Neanderthals. Homo neanderthalensis had ruled Europe for 300,000 years before modern humans arrived. They were perfectly adapted to Ice Age conditions, stocky bodies that conserved heat, massive lung capacity for cold air, and brains actually larger than ours. They made sophisticated tools, controlled fire, and cared for their sick and elderly. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, archaeologists discovered a Neanderthal burial surrounded by flower pollen, evidence that these primitive humans may have practiced ritual burial with grave goods. They understood death, they grieved, they honored their dead. But when modern humans spread into Europe 40,000 years ago, something changed. Within 10,000 years, a geological instant, the Neanderthals were gone. What happened? Competition for resources? Climate change? Warfare? Or something more subtle? Interbreeding that absorbed Neanderthal genes into the expanding modern human population. DNA evidence suggests all of the above. Modern humans outside Africa carry 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA. We didn't just replace our cousins, we absorbed them. Their genes live on in us, carrying Ice Age adaptations that helped our ancestors survive in frozen worlds. But the archaeological record also shows evidence of violence. Neanderthal sites abandoned suddenly. Modern human settlements built on top of Neanderthal camps. Stone tools that could have been weapons scattered across ancient battlefields. The extinction of the Neanderthals wasn't just the end of a species. It was the end of an alternative version of humanity, one that might have taken a completely different path through the Ice Age world. By 15,000 years ago, the last Ice Age was ending. Glaciers retreated, temperatures warmed, sea levels rose. The frozen world that had shaped human evolution for millions of years was melting away. But something else was disappearing too. Across every continent except Antarctica and Africa, the megafauna began to die.
In North America, mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, short-faced bears, dire wolves, American lions, giant beavers, and dozens of other species gone. In South America, giant armadillos, terror birds, massive ground sloths, saber-toothed marsupials gone. In Australia, giant wombats, marsupial lions, enormous monitor lizards, massive flightless birds, gone. In Europe and Asia, woolly rhinos, cave bears, giant deer, European hippos, gone. The only large animals that survived were those in Africa, the continent where humans had evolved alongside megafauna for millions of years, giving animals time to adapt to human hunting pressure. Everywhere else, the giants fell. Was this coincidence? Climate change killing species that couldn't adapt to warming conditions? Or was it something more sinister, the systematic extermination of the world's largest animals by the planet's newest apex predator? The answer to that question determines not just how we understand our past, but how we think about our future. Because the same species that may have driven the Ice Age giants to extinction now faces its own existential challenges. And the pattern of destruction that began 50,000 years ago may not be finished.
The last mammoth died alone on a frozen island, Wrangel Island, off the coast of Siberia, 4,000 years ago, while the pyramids were being built in Egypt, while Bronze Age civilizations flourished across the Mediterranean. The final mammoth on Earth took its last breath on a patch of Arctic tundra no bigger than Delaware. It had survived the end of the Ice Age, outlived the warming climate, endured 10,000 years while its species vanished from every other corner of the planet. But it couldn't survive what came next. Humans had finally reached the island. Within centuries, the mammoths were gone. Not from climate change, not from disease, not from natural disaster. From hunting. From the relentless expansion of the one species that had already driven giants to extinction across 6 continents. The mammoth's death marked the end of an era that had lasted 65 million years. The age of megafauna.
the age when giants ruled the earth. But was humanity really to blame? Or were we just the final blow to creatures already doomed by a changing climate? The answer determines everything we think we know about our species, our past, and our future on this planet. The evidence is written in bone and buried in ancient soil. At Blackwater Draw, New Mexico, archaeologists uncovered mammoth skeletons with Clovis spear points embedded between their ribs. Not scattered around the bones, not lying nearby, embedded, driven deep into flesh with enough force to stick in solid bone. These mammoths died violently. They died at human hands. Murray Springs, Arizona, 13 mammoths killed in a single hunt, butchered with stone tools, their bones cracked open for marrow. Leno Ranch, Arizona, mammoth and bison kill site with over a dozen Clovis points scattered among the bones. Kimswick, Missouri, mastodon bones with cut marks from human tools mixed with Clovis artifacts. Site after site across North America tells the same story. Humans weren't just scavenging megafauna carcasses. They were systematically hunting the largest animals on the continent. But the most damning evidence comes from spores. Fungal spores that feed on large mammal dung. For millions of years, these spores were abundant in sediment cores across North America, evidence of massive herds of megafauna dropping tons of dung across the landscape. Then, 12,900 years ago, the spore counts crashed, suddenly, dramatically, across the entire continent. The megafauna didn't gradually decline as the climate warmed. They disappeared almost overnight in geological terms, and the timing perfectly matches human arrival in the Americas. The smoking gun isn't just in North America, it's everywhere humans went. Australia, 50,000 years ago, modern humans reached the island continent and found a world of giants. Marsupial lions the size of leopards, wombats as big as rhinos, flightless birds taller than ostriches, monager lizards longer than crocodiles. Within 5,000 years, less time than recorded human history, 83% of Australia's large animal species were extinct. The survivors? Small animals that could hide, reproduce quickly or adapt to human pressure. The victims? Every animal over 100 pounds except the red kangaroo.
Humans arrived 2,000 years ago and found elephant birds 10 feet tall, giant lemurs the size of gorillas, and hippos that had evolved in isolation for millions of years. Within centuries, the giants were gone. New Zealand. The Maori reached these islands just 800 years ago and discovered moas, flightless birds that stood 12 feet tall and had no natural predators. The moas had survived ice ages, volcanic eruptions, and climate shifts for millions of years. They couldn't survive 2 centuries of human hunting. Caribbean islands. Whenever humans arrived, megafauna disappeared. Giant ground sloths, enormous rodents, flightless birds. Island after island, the pattern repeated. Only one continent breaks the pattern. Africa, the birthplace of humanity, where animals evolved alongside humans for millions of years and learned to fear bipedal predators. African megafauna survived because they knew us. They adapted. They ran when they saw us coming. Everywhere else, the giants had no fear of humans. We looked small, harmless, insignificant. They learned too late that appearances can be deceiving. But not everyone accepts the human guilt verdict. Climate scientists point to the Younger Dryas, the sudden return to Ice Age conditions 12,900 years ago. Temperatures plummeted, glaciers advanced, entire ecosystems collapsed. Maybe the megafauna were already stressed by rapid climate change. Maybe humans just delivered the final blow to species that were already dying. The Younger Dryas wasn't gradual warming interrupted, it was climate chaos. In less than a decade, temperatures dropped 15 degrees Fahrenheit across North America. The warming trend that had lasted 3,000 years reversed overnight. Forests died, grasslands turned to tundra, water sources froze solid. Animals adapted to warming conditions suddenly faced ice age cold. Some scientists argue this climate whiplash was the real killer. The overkill hypothesis, the idea that humans drove megafauna extinct, is just human arrogance. We want to believe we were powerful enough to reshape entire ecosystems. The reality is that climate change was doing the killing. We were just scavengers cleaning up the bodies. But the timing doesn't work. Human arrival in Australia preceded megafauna extinction by thousands of years, long before any major climate shift. In Madagascar, the climate was stable when the giants died. In New Zealand, there was no ice age, no warming, no dramatic environmental change. The only variable that matches extinction timing across every continent is human arrival. The debate becomes even more personal when we consider our closest relatives. Neanderthals survived 300,000 years of Ice Age extremes. They endured the brutally cold conditions of oxygen isotope stage 6, one of the harshest glacial periods in Earth's history. They adapted to rapid climate swings that would challenge modern civilizations. But they couldn't survive contact with modern humans. The timing is precise and damning. Modern humans spread into Europe 45,000 years ago. Neanderthal populations began declining immediately. By 40,000 years ago, they were extinct. Archaeological evidence shows Neanderthals and modern humans never directly competed for the same territory. They occupied different ecological niches. Neanderthals preferred forested regions. Modern humans favored open steppes and river valleys.
So what killed them? Violence is one possibility. Stone projectile points that could be weapons appear in the archaeological record exactly when Neanderthals begin disappearing. Modern humans had superior throwing technology, atlals, and later bows that could kill at range. But violence alone couldn't explain complete extinction. More likely, modern humans were simply more efficient at exploiting resources, better hunters, more sophisticated toolmakers, more effective at surviving harsh conditions. In the competition for survival during Ice Age extremes, modern humans had a slight edge. Over thousands of years, that edge compounded. Neanderthal populations dwindled. Genetic diversity declined. Eventually, they crossed the threshold into extinction. We didn't necessarily murder our cousins. We outcompeted them, which might be worse. But the most haunting evidence comes from the mammoth hunters themselves. Clovis sites across North America show evidence of incredible waste. Mammoth kill sites where only the choicest cuts were taken, the tongue, the fat, the marrow. Tons of meat left to rot. This wasn't subsistence hunting. This was surplus killing. Industrial-scale slaughter of creatures that took decades to mature and had low reproductive rates. Mathematical models show that even sustainable hunting pressure could drive mammoth populations extinct within centuries. But Clovis hunting wasn't sustainable. Archaeological evidence suggests they were killing mammoths faster than the herds could replace them. The Clovis culture lasted only 400 years. Then it vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. Why? Because they had hunted their primary prey species to extinction. Without mammoths, the specialized mammoth hunting culture collapsed. The descendants of Clovis hunters developed new technologies, new prey species, new survival strategies. But they never again had access to the massive protein bonanza that mammoth herds provided. In a sense, they were victims of their own success. This pattern would repeat throughout human history. Overhunting, resource depletion, cultural collapse, recovery, then overhunting again on a larger scale. The memory of lost giants haunts human mythology across every culture. Greek myths speak of titans, massive beings who ruled the earth before the gods overthrew them. Norse legends tell of frost giants who battled the gods at the end of the world. Hindu texts describe Rakshasas, enormous demons that terrorized early humans. Were these just fantasies, or were they cultural memories of real encounters with megafauna? Native American stories are more explicit. Lakota legends speak of the thunder beasts, massive creatures that shook the earth when they walked. Archaeological evidence confirms that Lakota ancestors hunted mammoths across the Great Plains. Inuit stories describe the tunrak, giant bears that lived in the ice and could swallow men whole. The timing and description match perfectly with short-faced bears, which went extinct shortly after humans reached the Arctic. Aboriginal Australians tell of the bunyip, a massive water-dwelling creature with the characteristics of various extinct megafauna. The stories are so consistent across different tribes that some researchers believe they represent genuine cultural memories of Diprotodon and other giant marsupials. Even our modern monster movies tap into these ancient fears. King Kong, Godzilla, dinosaur films, they all feature humans battling giants that dwarf our civilization. The emotional core of these stories is the same as Ice Age cave paintings. Small humans confronting massive, dangerous creatures.
We carry the memory of the giants in our DNA. The fear, the awe, the knowledge that we once shared the world with creatures that could crush us without noticing, and the guilt that we may have destroyed them. But the Ice Age extinctions were just the beginning. Since humans developed agriculture 10,000 years ago, the rate of species extinction has accelerated. Since the Industrial Revolution, it has exploded. Since 1970, wildlife populations have declined by an average of 60%. We are now in what biologists call the sixth extinction, the sixth mass extinction event in Earth's history, and the first caused by a single species. The pattern is the same as 50,000 years ago: human expansion, habitat destruction, overhunting, climate change, species disappearing faster than they can evolve. But now, we know what we're doing. We have the science to predict consequences. We understand ecosystem dynamics, population genetics, and conservation biology. Yet the killing continues. Maybe the Ice Age extinctions weren't aberrations. Maybe they were previews. Maybe the systematic elimination of competing species is what humans do. Not accidentally, not reluctantly, but because it's hardwired into our survival strategy. We are the descendants of mammoth hunters, of Neanderthal competitors, of the most successful predators in Earth's history. The question is, can we choose to be something else? That question becomes critical when we consider what's happening to Earth's climate right now, because the same orbital cycles that governed ice ages for millions of years are still running. The cosmic clockwork is still ticking. And according to the mathematics, we're overdue for the next ice age. What happens when the species that may have caused the last great extinction faces its own climate catastrophe? That story unfolds as we proceed.
The alarm went off at the National Center for Atmospheric Research in Colorado at 3:47 a.m. Dr. Sarah Chen stared at her computer screen in disbelief. The climate model she'd been running for 6 months had just produced results that challenged everything climatologists thought they knew about Earth's future. According to Milankovitch cycles, the next ice age should have started 2,000 years ago. Earth's orbit had reached the precise configuration that had triggered every major glaciation for the past million years.
Northern Hemisphere summers were weak. Ice should be accumulating in Canada and Scandinavia. The 100,000-year rhythm that had governed climate throughout human evolution was ready to beat again. But it wasn't happening. Greenhouse gas concentrations had risen so high that they were overwhelming the orbital signal. Humanity had pumped enough carbon dioxide into the atmosphere to cancel the next ice age entirely. For the first time in 2.6 million years, the Pleistocene's cosmic clockwork had been stopped. By us. Dr. Chen realized she was looking at data that proved something both terrifying and magnificent. Homo sapiens had become a geological force capable of overriding planetary climate cycles. We weren't just witnesses to Earth's climate system. We had become its operators. But did we understand the controls? By all rights, glaciers should be advancing across North America right now. The Milankovitch calculations are clear. Earth's orbital eccentricity is near minimum, reducing seasonal temperature contrasts. Our planet's axial tilt has decreased, weakening Northern Hemisphere summers. Precession is positioned to give the Arctic less intense summer heat. This is the exact configuration that triggered the last ice age 115,000 years ago, and the one before that 230,000 years ago, and every major glaciation for the past million years. The ice should be coming. Climate models run without human influence show glaciers beginning to accumulate in northern Canada within the next few thousand years. By 50,000 CE, much of North America should be under ice sheets. By 100,000 CE, glaciers should reach the Great Lakes. Europe would freeze first. Scandinavia would disappear under kilometers of ice. British Isles would become uninhabitable. Siberian ice sheets would merge with European glaciers, creating a frozen wasteland larger than Antarctica. This isn't speculation. This is what the orbital mechanics demand. This is what has happened dozens of times before. This is the natural rhythm of our planet. Except now, there's nothing natural about Earth's climate system. We have transformed Earth's atmosphere so completely that we've entered a new geological epoch, the Anthropocene, the age of human influence. Carbon dioxide levels now exceed 420 parts per million, higher than at any point in the past 3 million years. Before the Industrial Revolution, CO2 concentrations fluctuated between 180 ppm during ice ages and 300 ppm during warm interglacials. We've blown past the top of that range and kept climbing. The greenhouse effect from human emissions is now so strong that it overwhelms the cooling influence of orbital cycles. We've created an artificial summer that may last tens of thousands of years.
But this isn't just about temperature. The entire Earth system is changing in ways that have no precedent in the geological record. Ice sheets that took millions of years to build are melting in decades. Ocean currents that have flowed unchanged since the last ice age are shifting. Weather patterns that governed human civilization for millennia are becoming chaotic. We've done something that even asteroid impacts and massive volcanic eruptions couldn't accomplish. We've broken the 2.6 million year pattern of ice age cycles. The question is, what have we broken it into? Medieval Europeans didn't need climate models to sense something was wrong. The Little Ice Age, a period of cooling from roughly 1300 to 1850 CE, brought crop failures, famine, and social upheaval across the continent. Rivers froze solid, alpine glaciers advanced, winters became so harsh that the Thames regularly froze, allowing frost fairs to be held on the ice. But this wasn't even close to a true ice age. Global temperatures dropped only 1 to 2 degrees Celsius, yet the social consequences were catastrophic.
The Great Famine of 1315 to 1322 killed millions across Europe. Crop failures triggered social unrest. Economic systems collapsed. Some historians argue that the Little Ice Age contributed to the French Revolution. Centuries of agricultural stress, weakening the monarchy just as Enlightenment ideas challenged traditional authority. If a minor cooling event could destabilize European civilization, what would a real ice age do to our modern world? Medieval chroniclers interpreted the cold as divine punishment. Witchcraft trials increased during the coldest periods, desperate communities looking for someone to blame for inexplicable weather. The Malleus Maleficarum, the infamous witch-hunting manual, explicitly linked witchcraft to weather magic and crop failures. Even the Protestant Reformation has been linked to Little Ice Age climate stress. When traditional religious explanations failed to account for inexplicable suffering, people searched for new spiritual frameworks. Climate change doesn't just alter landscapes, it reshapes civilizations. But we're not facing ice, we're facing fire. Current warming is happening at least 10 times faster than typical post-Ice Age recovery. We're compressing thousands of years of natural climate change into decades. Ecosystems can't adapt. Species can't migrate fast enough. Even human societies, with all our technology, are struggling to keep up. Arctic sea ice is disappearing at a rate that would have seemed impossible even 20 years ago. The Greenland ice sheet is losing mass so rapidly that it's measurably affecting Earth's rotation. Permafrost across Alaska and Siberia is melting, releasing methane that accelerates warming in a dangerous feedback loop. We're not just preventing the next ice age, we're creating conditions that haven't existed since the Eocene epoch 56 million years ago, a time when palm trees grew in Alaska and there was no ice anywhere on the planet. But unlike the Eocene, which developed over millions of years, we're creating this hot world in centuries. Geological instant warming with no time for adaptation. The consequences are already visible. Heat waves that kill thousands, droughts that collapse agricultural systems, floods that displace millions, hurricanes that devastate entire regions. This is climate change as a weapon of mass destruction, deployed accidentally by a species that evolved during ice ages and has no genetic memory of how to survive in a permanently hot world.
Every culture has stories about how the world ends. Norse Ragnarok envisions the final winter, Fimbulwinter, lasting 3 years without spring. The sun and moon are devoured by wolves. The world tree Yggdrasil shakes. Giants and gods battle until everything burns and the world sinks into the sea. But after destruction comes renewal. A new world emerges from the ashes, green and beautiful, populated by the survivors of the old world. Hindu cosmology describes cycles of creation and destruction, spanning millions of years. The current age, Kali Yuga, is an age of darkness and moral decay that ends in fire and flood before the cycle begins again. Christian apocalypse literature envisions the world ending in fire and judgment, followed by a new heaven and new earth. Indigenous American prophecies speak of purification by fire or flood, after which the earth will be renewed. Even modern science fiction draws on these archetypal patterns: nuclear winter, alien invasion, asteroid impact, climate catastrophe, always followed by survivors rebuilding civilization. But our current situation doesn't fit the mythic template. We're not facing external forces, divine wrath, cosmic cycles, alien intervention. We are facing ourselves. The apocalypse is anthropogenic,
We are both the destroyers and the potential survivors. The mythic template doesn't tell us how this story ends, because it's never happened before. Climate models can project temperature and precipitation. They can estimate sea level rise and track changes in weather patterns. But they can't predict how human civilization will respond to a crisis unlike anything in our species' history. Will we adapt, develop new technologies, retreat to climate-stable regions, build artificial environments that shelter us from the transformed world? Or will we follow the pattern established by our Ice Age ancestors, migrate to new territories, compete violently for diminishing resources, drive other species to extinction in our struggle to survive? The archaeological record suggests humans are remarkably adaptable. We survived ice ages. We colonized every habitable continent. We developed agriculture, cities, global trade networks, space travel. But we've never faced a challenge that was entirely self-created. We've never had to adapt to problems caused by the success of our own species. The next century will determine whether intelligence and technology can overcome the destructive patterns encoded in our evolutionary history. Whether we can transcend our Ice Age origins and become something new, or whether the species that may have killed the last mammoths will become the author of its own extinction. In the opening of this story, alien observers returned to find Earth transformed by ice, creatures they didn't recognize, dominating landscapes they couldn't comprehend. But imagine them returning today, in our time of rapid change. They would find a planet being transformed even more dramatically than during the Ice Ages, not by cosmic cycles or climate evolution, but by a single species that had learned to reshape entire planetary systems. Cities that sprawl across continents, oceans crisscrossed by shipping routes, atmosphere altered by industrial chemistry, forests replaced by agricultural monocultures, rivers dammed and diverted, mountains stripped by mining. And at the center of it all, billions of bipedal creatures burning fossil fuels with the intensity of a geological process.
Would these aliens recognize this as the same planet they had visited during the Age of Ice and Giants? More importantly, if they returned in another 100,000 years, what would they find? Ice sheets restored by natural cycles, having overwhelmed human influence after our civilizations collapsed. A permanently hot world transformed beyond recognition by runaway greenhouse effects. Artificial environments maintained by technology we can't yet imagine. Or nothing at all. A sterile planet where intelligence briefly flickered and then extinguished itself. The cosmic clockwork that governed Earth's climate for millions of years is still running somewhere beneath our industrial alterations. The orbital cycles continue. The Ice Age rhythm persists, waiting for the day when atmospheric greenhouse gases decline enough for astronomical forces to reassert control. That day may come sooner than we think, or it may never come at all. For the first time in Earth's history, the answer depends not on physics or chemistry or biology, but on the choices made by a species of Ice Age survivors who learned to hunt giants and ended up becoming one themselves. The story that began when ice ruled the Earth now depends on what we do next, and we are running out of time to decide. History is full of voices that were silenced because no one chose to remember. Don't let this story be another echo that fades away. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and turn on notifications, because if you don't, this too may vanish, just like the civilizations we talk about. See you in our next video.